I welcome everyone back for this last 2 hours with us. So I hope you had a nice lunch break and moving right along. And before we get to our keynote of the day, let's kick another group activity called Troika Consulting to get practical and imaginative help from colleagues immediately. So peer-to-peer coaching helps. And I'm sure you know that, but I'm just repeating that peer-to-peer coaching is known to help discovering solutions, revealing patterns, but also refining some prototypes we might have. So it's a simple and effective process called Troika Consulting that we will use to extend coaching among us. Thinking about the future of HR leadership, what you have heard this morning, and by leadership, I mean all of us. So in your breakout rooms where you will be placed by the magic of Georgina, I invite you to explore the questions. What is your challenge when you think about future HR future leadership, and what kind of help do you need? All right. So you will be put in a breakout room of 3, and you will have 3 rounds of discussions. Each of you will get to be a coachee. So you will decide who starts first and who would like to start as a coachee. And you will have 1 minute to state your challenge or sort of help you are looking for or you are needing after what you have heard or after the reflections that you were doing throughout the conference. All right. Then 1 minute, after 1 minute, and after you have, thank you, after you have shared your question, your consultants or coaches, the 2 others, will ask you some clarifying questions to make sure that they understand your challenge or the help that you are looking for. Then you as a client will switch off your camera, but you will continue listening to your consultants or your coaches without reacting. So they will be discussing together, the 2 of them. They will be discussing your challenge. They might generate some ideas, suggestions, and coaching advice. So they will be doing that for 4 or 5 minutes. And then you put on your camera back and you share what was most valuable about the experience and about what you have heard. You will have to switch twice so that everyone gets to be coached by 2 other colleagues in your groups. All right? So when you come back, I will not ask you to share anything, because I really would like you to use this time within your group to really get something and to generate something valuable for you. We will have, at the end of the day, we will have another process where all of us will be harvesting our takeaways. So really this is for you, and I hope that it will be helpful. I think, Faye is going to join us, our keynote today. She's going to join, so you will be maybe lucky to be with her. And otherwise, I think we're going to be all super appreciative of all the coaching support we can give to each other during this process. So Georgina, if you can put us all in groups of 3, that will be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open the rooms now.
No, it was intense, but I hope it was nice and that you enjoyed it. So as promised, I'm not going to be interrogating you and asking you to share things, so keep them for yourself. If you couldn't finish, I invite you as well to maybe continue the connection with the 2 persons you've been in a breakout room, and maybe just to finalize that conversation you have started, or maybe someone didn't get to be coachee. So I let you do that, and I think you can exchange emails in Pathable, just sending direct messages to each other. So it's very easy. All right, so this year I think I was going to make a nice intro of why I was going to talk to about HR future leadership, but I will leave that to our keynote, because she will do this amazingly. And our next guest, Faye Ekong, join us today to share her insights on how HR leadership can best address future of work challenges and opportunities. She is a managing director and co-founder of Ravel Works Africa, with over 10 years experience in human resources management. implementing L&D and employee engagement programs, including at executive level in Africa, Europe, Asia, and North America. So she's a senior certified practitioner by the Society for Human Resources Management, and she is also focusing on organizational transformation and the future of work studies in Sub-Saharan Africa Studies PhD program right now. Just something personal about Faye is that she loves unplugging after work, and the way she unplugs is really you know, going to the gym or walking her dogs. And we had the pleasure as well to have her last year in the HHR, and it's just a delight. It's a real honor, and we're really happy to have you, Faye, with us to close the HHR. Warm welcome to you, and I give the floor to Faye.
Thank you. Thank you, Gozelle, for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure for me to be here again. I know in a bit of a different setting, but throughout the week and a different session, I've recognized a lot of the faces and the names. So even though we're not in the same room, it gives me a sense of familiarity, at least. At least I feel like I know some of you. You might feel differently about that. Now, one of the things about speaking last in a conference is it gets a bit tricky. Because I'm very cognizant that it is Friday afternoon for most of you, and you've been sitting at your computers for 4 days. So some of you might be looking at your watches and saying, listen, Faye, make this snappy, because I want to start my weekend in self-isolation. But also, we've had quite a number of other speakers who've been wonderful, and they've set the bar high. So before we get started in this discussion, just a caveat, or a few caveats I want to introduce. So I've had the pleasure in my career, or the opportunity to work, I would say, on both sides of the aisle. So that's been private sector and not-for-profit. So I started in the not-for-profit, went into the corporate, came back to the not-for-profit, and now I'm back in the for-profit, in the corporate sector. So that's given me a bit of an opportunity to see, you know, things I like and dislike in both sides. And that is to say, as I go through this discussion with you today, you might hear things from me that you don't agree with. And I want you to know that is fine, because the point of this discussion is not to reach a consensus, but rather to raise awareness and kind of our collective consciousness. And Anne, in her opening session, said, you know, sometimes we really benefit from listening to people who have different perspectives from ourselves. And Bina had mentioned that we all have an intrinsic bias based on our own values, our personal experience, our life journeys. So as we start this discussion, it's more of an invitation to you to take this reflective approach for the next 25 minutes with me. So to get us started, future of work, future of HR leadership is a big topic. So I'm curious to know what comes to your mind when you hear those terms. Future of work, future of HR leadership. And I know you are at this point specialists in Slido, with, you know, putting in, voting, putting your words. So let's have a look what comes up on the screen when you hear those words. What comes to your mind? Anything. It's not a technical assessment here, but just, yeah, digitalization, yeah, agile. Okay, it's good because we're going to be talking about agile as well. Still, agile is still. I'm going to have to lean down a bit to see it because my screen is below. Strategic, okay. Need for creativity. All right. Who said magician? Nice. Analytics, okay, a lot of challenges as well. Complication, buddy, somebody said as well, flexible. We got 32. I know we have 70 people in the room. Let me see if I can get this up to, let's say, 40. I want just 40 opinions here. So already getting closer, 37, 38, 39, and almost 40. We've hit it. We've hit it. Okay, the votes, we're still counting the votes. They're still coming in. No, let me not say that because I might be sensitive at the moment. But thank you. So lots of different things, but the main things are around agile and digitalization. So, well, we can leave it open for a while, or we can start closing the Slido as well. So thank you for those contributions. Now, what am I going to talk about in 25 minutes? You know, is 25 minutes enough to cover the future of HR and future of leadership. No. So I'm going to really focus my talk with you on some specific areas. So one, I want to talk with you a bit about VUCA, and particularly VUCA in terms of the disconnect that exists in our HR profession about how we talk about VUCA and what do we do when a situation like COVID, which has got all of the characteristics of VUCA, actually hits us, okay? Second of all is then saying, well, what does the future of work actually look like? And I'll walk you through 4 different scenarios that forecast the future of work up to 2030, so that we have a bit of an idea what we could maybe expect. And finally, what are 2, and I'll just focus on 2 competencies or domains that I believe as HR practitioners we need to develop so that we're ready for that future of work. So let's start with VUCA. Those words or that term has been around for 5-10 years. And I've heard it in so many discussions in meetings and organizations talking about the future is so unpredictable. So many things can happen any moment now. And as a result, we need to be agile, flexible, innovative, creative. We need to embrace the change. The moment though a change came, which had everything, it was volatile, uncertain, a lot of ambiguity, it was very complex. As HR practitioners, generally speaking, we found ourselves really ill-prepared to respond to this. And the whole discussion around VUCA is not even new in the HR environment. There's been a lot of actually 2 books, which I will mention to you, and Gozelle, I'll share them with you. One of them is called Black Holes and White Spaces, and the other one is The Rise of HR. And it's a collection of HR essays from thought leaders from all over the world that really help think through what HR practitioners need to be doing to embrace that future. And they talk about everything from your engagement with your boards, external stakeholders, learning, culture, talent acquisition, you name it. And when I started to look into it, I said, well, why do we have this kind of a disconnect? Doesn't make any sense. And where I see it emanating from is that while as HR practitioners, we talk about the theory of VUCA, we have not been able to practically apply it. And partially that is because still to this day, the function is very inward looking. Okay, the function is not very active in looking at the world around us, what's actually happening, what's trending, what's likely to happen. And I guess just from this audience even, if I asked you, where do you spend most of your time? On internal issues, which is compliance, timesheets, leave requests, updating a policy, making a new procedure, or on external? And when I say external, I mean external, not outside of your HR department, right? Not even outside of your organization. I mean, outside of your sector. What is going on in the global world, in different regions and different economies? What do your end users, in your case, the communities you serve, actually need and want and desire? How do they see their future evolving? How do they see their sense of agency and empowerment growing? And how has their lives been impacted by COVID-19? That's the kind of external I'm talking about. So now that we've said, well, okay, we're probably a bit inward focused. So what should we therefore be looking at? How can I be outward focused if I don't know what I'm looking for in the future? So here's what I will propose, and it's not my scenarios, but PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, in 2017 already did a projection of what different worlds of work might look like by 2030. And I'll walk you through each of them and also my interpretations of what I think that would mean for the nonprofit sector in particular and the HR position. So the first world of work is the blue world of work. And they've color-coded it to make it easier. So we're going to look at the blue, the red, the yellow, and the green world of work. So the blue one you can see here, it's about capitalism. So in the blue world of work, capitalism really reigns supreme. It's a world in which big corporations will become more powerful and more influential than nation states. And in a way, we're already starting to see some of those trends. When we look at the Facebooks, the Google, the Alibaba, those are very, very powerful corporations. And in a blue world of work, the bigger, the better, okay? A blue world of work will mean that the disparities, the gap between the have and the have not is going to get bigger, not smaller. So the blue world of work will really look at key people who have extreme talent, they will be rewarded, and the rest of us, we are useless in that particular world of work. We don't count. We might have inferior working conditions, or we might be, replaced by machines. So it sounds very heartless and very cruel, but it's one of the scenarios. And what this might mean in a non-profit setting is, well, if bigger is better, it means for a lot of smaller organizations, they would cease to exist, because you simply cannot operate at the scale, the impact, the scope, and the efficiency that will be required in the blue world of work. And so rather than having 500 or 600 organizations all working on gender, you would find donors, governments, philanthropists pooling all of these resources, giving it to one organization that can do the whole job. So that's our blue world for us. So some of you on this virtual call might be saying, okay, listen, I really don't like this blue stuff. What other colors do you have? I mean, give me something else, okay? So, well, let's have a look at another version then. So another scenario is the red world of work. And the red one you can see here is about innovation. It's about agility. It's about speed. So in a way, the red would be the opposite of the blue. In the red world, the smaller, the better, because we need organizations and companies that can quickly respond to changes in the environment. So if you are a big organization, a big INGO, by the time you make a decision on anything, how many working groups, validation procedures, feasibility studies, evaluations, by the time you get to any conclusion, you will be obsolete, because the smaller players will have moved like this because they can. They can change within 24 hours, 48 hours. So in a red world of work, we might see that smaller organizations, companies, or even entrepreneurs have the upper hand because they can just move a lot faster. But what does a red world of work mean for our workforce? Well, here's where it starts to get a bit tricky. In a red world of work, we would see nearly 0 employees. So 0 officially employed people on the payroll. Why? Because we're looking at being agile and quick and fast. And when you have lots of people on payroll and lots of employees, you cannot move that fast. So we would see a lot more propensity towards the gig economy, freelancers, short-term contracts, and very few staff on payroll. Which also means that in a red world, the HR function would disappear. It's not needed because it can be outsourced to a third-party supplier who will just do everything for us. And at the same time, looking at innovation and technology would mean that a lot of the procedures that HR practitioners are still to date involved in, which is uploading timesheets, filling out Excel sheets, photocopying documents, scanning contracts, well, we don't need a department for that anymore. Technology will take care of that. So that's our red world. Okay, so blue, big is good, red, small is better. What else have I got? Let's look at green. And now some of you might say, green sounds like a good plan. Green is an uplifting color. It's very positive. It has a lot of energy. That's the one I need. I need this green world. Eyes up, let's check it. So green, we see here, is all about society. But it's about organizations that invest not only in themselves, but also in their wider communities. So organizations that are socially conscious will have the upper hand here, because that is what the world will be looking for. Not just on paper, but in reality, right? So the whole notion of doing well by doing good, the whole concept of the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit will not be in the green world just a nice to have, good, looks good, but it's an essential a core of business reality in this world. Well, now, before you get too excited and say, well, I already do that, let me just walk you through what this might mean. Because if companies are going to fill this space of doing social projects, working with communities, we start to wonder what will be the gap that nonprofit is filling if private sector is going there already. Right now, the majority of you do not compete with Microsoft when it comes to programs and tenders. But in a green world of work, you might have to. It will be very common for organizations or companies to have leave for their staff, which is purely to devote themselves to social projects that they're interested in. And the HR function in a green world would be renamed to now be called People and Society. So while a green world of work might be good and positive, but it might raise some questions on where do we come in as a sector, or where does the nonprofit sector stand? And you might say, well, this is then a bit far removed. Actually, no. So for those of you who follow the economic philosophy of Afri-capitalism, which is gaining traction here where I am in sub-Saharan Africa, and at the heart of this philosophy is really the notion that private sector in sub-Saharan Africa holds the key to development of the continent. Not INGOs, not governments, but it's private sector. We can make a difference. Not just we can, but we need to make a difference, because when communities are uplifted, purchasing power goes up. Those communities are my future clients. They are my future buyers of my products and my services. And if they have more economic power and purchasing power, that's good for my business and everybody wins. So just say, so far, the three colors, all of them might mean some changes for us as a sector and for us as HR practitioners. So let me take you to the final color and we see if there's some hope, okay? If there's some hope in there. And so the final world of work is the yellow one. And this is really all about people. In the yellow world of work, the human imperative is at the core, all right? And Susan talked about it in her keynote, where she said people are looking for purpose, belonging, meaning, all of these things. And that would really come out key in the yellow world of work. It's organizations needing to invest in their people and truly invest in their people, not just in rhetoric by saying, well, our people are our biggest assets, but no, meaning this as well, and doing it consistently for all of their staff. So in a yellow world of work, we would see a lot more focus on inclusion, on equity, on fairness. Staff would be demanding that, and only organizations who can really provide that will be able to attract the talent that they need to survive in that world of work. So yellow in a nonprofit setup. And again, I can hear some of you maybe silently saying to yourselves, that's okay, yellow is good because we are all about people. Well, in a yellow world of work, what I imagine would need to change in the nonprofit sector is the two-tier system of national staff versus expatriate staff, or three-tier system of national, expat, and headquarter. Because you would need to justify, you would need to really be able to justify what makes it that I can pay less, I can provide less benefits, less support, less guidance to one category of my staff. What is the justification for that invisible or that glass ceiling that says you can make it up to here, but when it comes to those prime leadership positions, my friend, you are out of the race. That's not where you belong. So those would be some of the questions that would be very at the forefront of the yellow world of work. And I know a lot of you have been having those discussions already. Even this week, again, we saw it about equity and changing your pay practices, but that would be at the core. Now, of course, we don't know what world of work we might ultimately end up in. I think we can see across the board different, components or colors coming out. Some countries we might have a blue world with red speckles. In other countries, we might have a yellow world with the green undertones. It is possible. But the point is not to be able to predict with accuracy exactly which world we're having, but as HR practitioners to know, okay, so if this is going on, then I need to be aware of what does that mean in terms of competencies that I need to develop? How can I be ready for this? And throughout this pandemic, in many of the discussions that I've had or research I've been doing with business leaders, with HR practitioners, both in the nonprofit and for-profit sector, after a while, kind of different domains started to emerge. And in total, I identified 4, but I'm only going to talk to you about 2 because I think those 2 are the most important for this sector and for HR practitioners. So the first domain is what I call the futures domain. And that's really the ability of HR to take on a more strategic foresight role. So being able to say what's going on in the world around us, how do I paint a compelling picture, and how do I practice this outside in HR as opposed to inside out, okay? So if I know what our end users, the communities actually need and what they're going through, I can develop HR initiatives that respond to that, okay? I can identify what kind of talent do I need in my organization to connect with with those communities or to connect with those local governments. And that might mean I build the talent, might mean I buy it, or might mean you outsource, which I know is not very common in this sector. It also might mean a huge departure from your classical humanitarian rosters that we all have. And if there's one thing I can tell you with almost 100% certainty, is that the communities you serve don't really care whether you have updated your theory of change or whether you have used balanced scorecard in your last strategic plan, right? They have other concerns about what does the future hold for me, for my family, my community, my sense of agency. How can I get out of the situations I'm in? And what I would invite HR practitioners to do is to get out of the HR bubble and connect with those stakeholders, because they are the ones that really matter. And if we understand them, we can bring that information back into our organizations and develop employee value propositions that respond to that, as opposed to sitting in our bubble, developing our own policies and procedures, and then hoping that somehow that will also be useful to the outside world. The second point, or the second domain, which I think we need to be developing, is what I call the cognitive domain. And this is really about novel and adaptive thinking. All of us in this call are well versed and probably highly skilled in making excuses and justifications on why something cannot work, that we don't need to practice that anymore. We know how to do that. So yesterday, David mentioned in his keynote speech that when he asked his IT team how long it would take to move into full remote, IT team said, oh, this is going to be very tricky and very, very complicated, at least 2 years before we get there. And then COVID came, and within a few weeks, voila, everybody was working remotely. So it shows us how the things that we don't think are possible, no, actually, they really are. If last year, during the HHR, somebody had the audacity to suggest that I think for 2020, we should do this event online. Woo, my goodness, can you imagine? No, we can never do online. The heart of this conference is being together. Nobody will attend. Internet connectivity is going to be terrible. We would have had all of this. Yet here we are a few months later, and it's worked just fine for 4 days. So what I'm trying to say with that is I'm inviting HR to not just wait until we are forced to respond to the circumstances because we have no choice, but anytime that we have this protective reaction that says, no, it's going to be tricky, to say, actually, hang on. COVID has proved, if anything, that things that we didn't think we could do yesterday, we were able to do by tomorrow. And it's taking a step back and saying, but what if? What if I had no choice? And what would I then do differently? And I'll take a practical example from this sector. The pay equity. I know it's contentious, but this is a discussion which has been going on for years. 4 years. We are trying to harmonize our salary grids. We are seeing, we are looking, we're having discussions, we are benchmarking, we are having another committee meeting, and a working group has been set up. We're getting a consultant in. There's been years of this kind of stuff, right? And still, progress is, well. But what if somebody told you by Monday morning, I need to see one salary grid, that's it. I don't want to hear any more discussions. I don't want to have any more consultants. Just tell me what are the numbers we start paying by the end of the month, right? So that's the kind of thinking that I'm inviting for HR practitioners to have. And I know to get there or to practice these two domains requires investment in ourselves. And it's not something which as HR we're used to doing. We spend most of our time trying to build others and invest in others. And when I say investing in ourselves, you're not going to get it by reading an article that says 5 tips for HR to, manage anxiety in the workplace during COVID. That's not where it's going to come from. But it's a conscious choice of rolling our sleeves and taking that outward in approach. We have an opportunity right now where I believe HR practitioners are uniquely positioned to make a difference, because many of the skills required in the future are things we already have, but we've not been using them in the right proportions, right? We've been focused internally and not externally. So this is my invitation to you, even when things feel uncomfortable, to keep going. And when you make a mistake or you change your mind, that's not a sign of incompetence of an HR practitioner. That's a sign of evolution. That's a sign of an HR practitioner being able to adapt to the changing times that require us to, today I have this information, tomorrow I have different, I gotta change everything completely. I didn't know this yesterday. So it's an invitation in a way for all of you, or it's a choice that each one of you can make every single day. And it's a choice between choosing comfort or choosing courage. And I think it's courage is what we need going forward. So thank you very much. Gozelle, I hand over to you, yeah.
Yes, I was just taking a breath before I start the questions. We already have questions, and Faye, just before we get to the questions, thank you. You are amazing and as amazing as ever. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And so we will take most upvoted questions on Slido as usual. And if we will have too many that are left, I will follow up with Faye to make sure that I get her answers to those as well. So the first question we have for you, Faye, is really about the trends that you might see on the workforce, or about the workforce in terms of remote work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are the trends you see?
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting because we were discussing a little bit in the coaching session about that. And what's been interesting to me is that the room is kind of split, because for as many people who really dislike this remote working and find it very difficult, there's equally as many who love it and who are enjoying the fact that they don't need to be around their colleagues every day, they don't need to commute, etc. So the trends that I'm seeing, particularly if we go into a more yellow, is it will continue because employers will be expected to offer their employees more flexibility in terms of how we work, where we work, how we talk and think about work. I don't believe it will be easy to go back to the pre-COVID time, because we have tested and tried something and it's actually working, I would say, quite well, considering it's still very early days. So I think it's going to continue. It might even become more pervasive even once travel restrictions and everything is lifted. Many companies and organizations will really rethink about, do I really need to hire everybody, let's say in Nairobi, and have them in my office? Can't I have my finance person in Rwanda, the other guy in Congo, and one person, in Geneva, because it still works. And that way I can also ensure not just greater diversity in terms of just national origin, but also diversity of thought and diversity of experiences in my workforce.
Faye, and just to, as you were speaking about the reaction and about the new normal, and you were saying that there will be no pre-COVID times, can I just ask you to share your reaction to, and your team's reaction to, the first news of confinement? I find it, I think that it will be very insightful.
Well, I know I have a few of my team members, I'm sure, on this call, so they'll be laughing. But when COVID first hit, we had a choice, right? And we had a choice to say, oh my goodness, and freeze, or do something. And so when COVID hit, we moved immediately everything to virtual, because we said, look, if this is the new normal, let's switch everything. Doesn't matter, whatever you've been doing before, forget about it, move to virtual. If COVID goes away, we're fine. We know how to do the pre-COVID, but what we need to adapt to is that. And that helped us a lot, I would say, on two aspects. One, because it gave all of us something to do. Instead of worrying about COVID, we all had something now new to do, new skills to learn very, very quickly. I think COVID hit here, the first case, end of March. We were rocking and rolling by the first week of April. So that's one. But second of all, we also had dedicated panic time, because we understood that, you can't control this. People will freak out about stupid things or real things. It doesn't really matter. It's not yours is better, mine is worse. But we had dedicated panic time. You could choose the panic time which was most suitable for you. You could freak out about anything you wanted. It didn't matter. Do it. Have your freak out. We'll all listen and understand, and then let's get back to work. Because anxiety has got to come down at some point, right? If you let it out, it will peak, and then you're like, oh, okay, I got my 400 rolls of toilet paper. I'm good. And then I can continue what I was doing before.
Thank you, Faye. And just maybe going back to that, you were saying about the two-tiered system and staff. We have also a question, a good number of votes. What if we were not able to deploy expatriate staff anymore due to travel restrictions, and we had to rely 100% on national staff? How would we upskill by Monday?
So, now some of you know that I have very, let's say, strong views on this issue between national staff and expatriate, because I'll ask my question back. I will say, what is your evidence to suggest that within the countries you're working, that skill set doesn't exist? Have you done a labor market analysis that clearly shows that finance or procurement or nutrition or whatever, that skill set does not exist in that particular labor market? In most cases, the answer will be no. It's just we've always worked this way, that managers, country directors, finance has got to be somebody from outside the country. My second question is, sometimes people say, yeah, but we can't get the talent in Uganda or in Nigeria that we need. Oh, have you looked at the salary that you're paying for a Nigerian vis-a-vis the salary that you're paying for a non-Nigerian? The skill set exists, but you got to pay for it just like you would anywhere else in the world. I can't speak for Asia or Latin America, but in Africa, we have vibrant private sector. We have banks, we have lots of institutions which have highly skilled and qualified Africans holding those positions. But they're not doing it for $400 a month. They're not doing it without healthcare insurance. I mean, so you've got to kind of level the playing field and say, look, if I want to have quality costs money no matter where in the world I go for that. So my question would be, if tomorrow you had to nationalize, what would really go wrong? Are you trying to tell me all your projects would all of a sudden collapse? I don't think so, because in many cases, your projects have still been running, and some of your international staff have been out of the country maybe for 6 months or 8 months in certain cases. So it's more thinking through that way. It's really which skills in particular do not exist in that local labor market, and then how can I inject it via short-term assignments or some kind of capacity building. And that might be even, we're seeing a lot more, let's say, propensity now within the continent for regional mobility, okay? So Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa is very good examples. They're kind of the talent hubs in Africa for West, East, and Southern Africa. So what we're seeing a lot in private sector is they're rotating. I'm opening up a new plant in Uganda. I bring in a couple of Kenyans to help us set it up. There's no big visa requirement, big mobility issues. And they come in, they help, they go. And same Nigerians doing a lot in West Africa and South Africa, you know, going into then Zimbabwe and these kind of places. So that's another way to look at it as well, is within the continent, where can I get some talent from that can come in for some time to support? Yeah.
Thank you, Faye. That's some good tips, and I think that they resonated with all of us. Back to pay equity, no one seems to want to be first movers. How can we drive forward this agenda with one scale for all as an individual organization and in the sector as a whole?
Yeah. I don't know if that is true to say that nobody wants to be a first mover on that. And I'll say that particularly because I know of one organization that has harmonized their skills fully for so-called what used to be before headquarter positions, let's put it this way, which can now be based anywhere in the world. And there's one scale, doesn't matter who you really are. But I understand what you're trying to say. And my question would be really, what is holding you back? And I've been dealing with pay equity and compensation for many years and trying to stabilize or harmonize it across the board. And there's some kind of common, I don't know, I'm not going to say excuses, but in the way they are that we hide behind, you know, which can be, well, but we can't harmonize the scales because when people come from Norway, their cost of living is more expensive there than it is in Uganda. Yes, but you are going to be working in Uganda. So your cost of living needs to be adjusted to the country that you're going to. That's one. Number two, I didn't ask you to leave Norway to come here. You chose to take this particular job. Now, whether that means you have to leave your family, go with your family, that's not really the employer who needs to compensate for that. The same way if you moved from Geneva now to France or something like that, the employer wouldn't really, that's your choice. So I would say some of these discussions around, we can't do it because, it's more expensive in one country than it is in another. What I would suggest in those scenarios is peg yourself to the market from which you want to acquire your talent from, okay? And if you want to have regional talent or global talent, well, then you're going to have to use a global scale for certain positions. But what that means is that whoever gets that position gets the global pay package. So you won't say, because your passport is the same as this country, I'm going to reduce your pay by 40%. But if you came from across the border, well, then you'd be really lucky. And it goes back also to the thing where people say, well, we can't keep our staff. They always want to move and become international staff. Well, of course, because my salary increases 4 times if I cross the border. And I get a car and I get my house paid and my school fees and per diem and living allowance. Who wouldn't take on this opportunity? So it's more thinking about that. What are you trying to do with your pay structure? Are you trying to encourage people to stay within their countries, or are you trying to encourage people to leave at the first opportunity that they have?
So with all those great, recommendations and advice, how do you get our management, our top leadership on the same pace, page and thinking as HR to adapt to current times and future?
Yeah, so because sometimes, of course, management can be the issue, right? I get that as well. So looking at, let's go first back to the example of pay. And so I remember myself being involved in a pay transition with the executives and with the board. And to be honest with you, it was a long road. It was, 9 months of us really fighting and pushing with the CEO and with the board, because they threw all of these excuses at us, but this. One of it is you got to be prepared to kind of get your hands dirty as HR, and stand for what you believe is the right thing to do. That's one. For you who are dealing with managers who are, let's say, themselves very adverse to any of the changes, or trying to see how do I control my workforce, or blocking some of the things, my recommendation would be is the recognition first that managers and leaders are also people. And in this particular time, they're going through also their own stresses and anxieties, sometimes even an additional level, because all their other staff are looking to them for solutions and answers, and they don't have it themselves. So I found HR practitioners who could sit with their management team on a one-on-one basis and say, walk me through what's going on right now. What's happening on your end? What worries you the most? What do you stay awake? What keeps you awake at night? And then working with them to say, what if I could take some of that pressure off your shoulders? Okay, give me 3 months. I'm going to run this pilot. This is what I'm going to do. Let me handle it. That's why you've hired me. That's why you're paying me. And after 3 months, we'll look at it and review. And I find a lot of times when we take that approach to say, I'm here to help you, rather than saying, our staff want more this, we need more that, where managers tend to be like, whoa, not HR again in my office. So it's understand first what are their needs, what are their fears, and then see how you can come in to say, I'll take some of this off your shoulders. Give me 3 months or 6 months, I'll handle it.
Well, great. Just maybe before we take remaining questions, if we have time. It's not a question, the next one, it's a comment, Faye. I will read it out loud. Thank you, Faye. You are always so inspiring and motivating.
Thank you.
How do you get beyond politics and hierarchy and the fear of mistake or our risk-averse, cultures to be able to live out by the courage that you described?
Well, I wish I could say there's a formula. If you drink 2 glasses of water and then you have a teaspoon of salt, you're good to go. Courage just develops in you. But unfortunately not. And we've had that discussion a lot. Actually, people said, how do I develop courage? And I don't have a formula for that. But what I do have is, when you take some time as an individual, as a professional, to reflect and introspect on what are my values, what is important to me, what are things that I will not waver from, then courage tends to come naturally, because you know what is the right direction to go. And I think in today's world of work, many of us don't spend that time, right? We're busy rushing around, running, taking jobs because it sounds good, because it's a promotion, without thinking what's important to me. And for me in my career, those have been the moments that given me the most courage. When I knew something didn't sit right, and I knew the easy option was to say, yeah, it's fine, let's just not rattle any feathers, but I can't. And sometimes that means really sitting at the extreme edge and saying, look, this is my proposition as an HR leader, as my values. If we don't do it this way, I gotta quit, because those values then of the organization are not in line with what I know I need to do as a professional. I can't stop you as a company or organization doing that, but I don't need to be part of that journey. So, and I know that's not easy, especially now with COVID, people saying, yeah, I need my job. So I'm not suggesting everybody, do that, but I'm saying that's kind of the thinking you gotta have is, what are you more comfortable, let's say, with in the long term? Is it knowing you could have made a difference, but you didn't have the courage to do so? Or saying, I stood up for something, it didn't work in this particular case, but I learned and I took it into another direction or into another organization that was more open to that way of thinking.
Thank you, Faye. Another question, and maybe the last one, and then we will have 4 remaining questions for you that I'll follow up with you, sort of questions, comments.
Yeah.
Okay, we just had another one, so it's going to be 5 questions. So the last question for you is, most of us have been stuck to our HR desks and laptops. What are some practical steps that you took to break out of the HR bubble?
Yeah, so I guess going back to the outside in, right? So I realized pretty early that all of the solutions that I was coming up with and policy changes were actually not making any difference, okay? And that was bothering me a lot, because I felt like, but this is the, gold standard of HR. How can people be against it? How can we have resistance? That doesn't make any sense. And so I realized at some point, I said, I got to stop talking and I got to do more listening, right? Because human behavior is not random, okay? We behave in certain ways because we want to protect something which we feel right now is ours, or because we're scared that we might, be seen as making mistakes. So that's how I kind of went out of it. I started to spend more time with, first of all, internally different teams, let's say when I was still in the not-for-profit, external relations, finance, procurement, to understand what does your day look like? What really stresses you? What's going on in your department? And I started to realize, okay, so if this is what your day-to-day looks like, then what we are talking about is just adding more stress. But also then talking more to the communities that we were serving to see, okay, so tell me, what does your day look like? What do you think this particular organization is offering you? And what would strike me sometimes is communities would get so mixed, they don't even know which organization is which, okay? They don't know you are DRC, you are Oxfam, they just know somebody put a school or a feeding center or did something. And I said, hang on a second, with all this money we spend on branding and cars and t-shirts, for these guys, it doesn't really matter. And so the more I spoke and listened to them and said, what matters to you? I started to see that needs a different skill set. We don't have the workforce for that, or not, uniformly the workforce. So that's it. My first recommendation is even just speak to another department, not in the sense of, let me tell you the new policy that we're about to roll out, but spending time listening to what it is that bothers them. And then seeing with your country teams, if you can, to find out a little bit more what's going on. I know you can't visit right now the country teams in some of the communities, but getting more of that information out, yeah, because it's there. Your organizations produce, I'm sure, hundreds of reports, evaluation studies, progress reports, monthly reports, annual reports, publications. So a lot of the information is already there to give you an idea, and then you got to connect with the people and find out how they see it. Yeah.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you so much. We could not have wished for a better keynote to close the conference, but also better keynote on the subject of HR future leadership. I can't just thank you enough for being with us, for finding time, and just for giving us all your energy, all your recommendation, your thoughts, sharing everything in such an honest and straightforward fashion. Thank you. Really, coming from heart, thank you. And on behalf of all HHR, I'm thanking you. I think you really stretched everyone's minds with different walls you presented. So I think we have lots of things to think about. The subject and the books that you have mentioned, I think they really intrigue me. So I'm planning to read them. And so we unfortunately have to take a break so that we can, let everyone go on time. I will follow up with you, but just great thank you. And maybe if I can ask for a warm round of applause for Faye. Thank you, Faye.
Thank you for having me as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
So let's take a break and come back at 16:30. Thank you.